Georgia's coastal waters contain a vast array of incredible marine life. We'll take a look at some of our most notable marine animals, as well as a few that you might not be aware of. Next on Georgia Outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.
Most of the Earth's surface is covered by water, over 70%. The allure of what lies beneath our oceans, the endless parade of species, complex ecosystems, and uncharted habitats has inspired wonder, awe, fear, and respect for centuries. Though our understanding of marine life is far more refined today than in times past, mysteries still remain about the delicate web of life beneath the ocean's surface. Georgia's coast hosts a variety of species, some well known and often seen, others more obscure but no less fascinating. Much of the diversity of Georgia's marine life can be attributed to our unique geography.
Georgia is located in an area that's referred to as the Central South Atlantic Bight. Because of our location, we have the highest tidal amplitude, so we have a tremendous exchange of water between the ocean and the marshes and the estuary. That mixing zone creates a range of habitats that are all the way from fresh tidal to ocean water salinities. So just about anything you could think of, we've got a little bit of it in coastal Georgia. The wide diversity of sea life in Georgia, you can divide it out into the vertebrates and invertebrates. And typically the vertebrates are a more advanced animal life form. They're generally less abundant than the invertebrates. And the invertebrates are the things we think about like crustaceans such as blue crabs, just a whole variety of organisms that their population probably numbers in the millions, billions, and trillions of animals. And then the vertebrates, you move over to the fishes, the modern fishes, king mackerel, species like that, and then you've got the reptiles, sea turtles, which are the ones that are most prominent in the reptile fauna in the ocean. The sharks are sort of in between a vertebrate and invertebrate because they have cartilaginous skeletons, but they are still classified as vertebrates. Then when you've got the marine mammals, the bottlenose dolphins, a variety of whales that transit through our waters, the right whale being the one that most people associate with coastal Georgia.
From corals to jellyfish to crabs and shrimp, invertebrates inhabit every nook and cranny of ocean habitat and form the foundation of the marine ecosystem. Marine invertebrates include mollusks like clams and oysters, echinoderms such as starfish, and crustaceans. Shrimp and crab are two crustaceans that have become synonymous with coastal Georgia. Whether shrimping with a cast net, a seine net, or setting a crab trap, shrimping and crabbing have long been traditional pastimes on the coast. But just a few years ago, populations of these creatures seemed in peril, particularly one of our most recognized crab species, the blue crab.
The prolonged drought that we experienced in coastal Georgia from the late 90s up into the early part of the 21st century had a devastating impact on blue crabs. Our scientific surveys indicated that the population declined to about 90% off the long-term average. We took some extra measures to protect the blue crab population. We prohibited the harvest of egg-bearing females. That prohibition is currently still in effect. Population's back now. We've got a good abundance of blue crabs in our waters, but it's a keystone species, and during the drought people became a lot more sensitive to the fact that an animal that once appeared to be virtually unlimited in abundance could drastically decline when environmental conditions were unfavorable.
One of our coastal crabs isn't a crab at all. Georgia's beaches are home to the horseshoe crab.
Well, they're a very ancient creature, been around for literally millions and millions of years. Externally, more or less physically unchanged. Got through all of those mass extinctions. There's nothing that's really closely related to it. They're not crabs at all. They are more closely related to arachnids and scorpions and things like that. For some reason, people have this belief they can be harmed by them. And this is completely untrue. That tail that they have, that long tail, is so that they can right themselves. They stick the tail into the ground and flip themselves over. So it's not a defensive thing at all.
Though they spend much of their lives in offshore waters, horseshoe crabs can occasionally be found wandering our beaches. In the spring, horseshoe crabs come to the beach in vast numbers to spawn.
Horseshoe crabs nest on the highest tides that are available during a month. The sort of basic pattern is that there's a female who swims toward shore. Males are swimming around out there offshore. They're attracted to these females, grab a hold. They hold on to these spines at the back of the female. And then the two of them go ashore. When they get to the shore, the female digs down into the sand. And when she gets down a little ways, she starts to lay eggs. The eggs are actually fertilized outside the body. Males will come in across many tides, so there are always more males on the beach than females. And those extra males gather around this spawning pair. They sit there and just dump sperm underneath her so that when she lays eggs, there's sperm both from her attached male and from these satellite males.
Each female lays up to 80,000 eggs in the sand at a time, a delicious meal for migrating shorebirds. In the United States, Delaware Bay is famous for its horseshoe crab spawning event. Thousands of birds descend upon the beaches each year. Recently, biologists have discovered Georgia is home to a similar phenomenon.
It's a well-studied phenomenon up in the mid-Atlantic states that we didn't have a clue that it was actually going on here. But we started seeing large concentrations of shorebirds in remote areas on the Georgia coast, clearly feeding on horseshoe crab eggs. We still really know very little about it. We know that the horseshoe crab spawning sites are dispersed throughout the coast. There isn't one huge concentration area, but the shorebirds know about it. And it's a matter of timing, with the shorebirds coming north and getting ready to fly even farther north up into Canada and the high Arctic, even as far away as Alaska.
So you can see he's holding on to the posterior spines, and he has these modified claws that he uses.
This group of teachers is getting a first-hand look at this amazing phenomenon at the Green Eggs and Sand Workshop, led by some of the top horseshoe crab experts in the country.
Horseshoe crabs are really interesting because they are considered to be living fossils. And to know that this little critter has survived for so long when we've had so many other species become extinct and things, that it's interesting now to see how humans have affected it. And they've also been able to really put up with humans. And they're just cool. I mean, you flip them over and it's like, whoa, what is this thing? It's got all these legs and pinchers. So we should definitely study them, get to know more about them.
They're coming up from the southern part of South America, Argentina, Tierra del Fuego, the very south tip. They're working their way north now. I imagine they're coming up probably in Brazil or a little bit farther north.
Just being out right there out on the beach with them while they are spawning, seeing the eggs, seeing how the shorebirds are utilizing the eggs, and being able to be in the presence of some of the most well-respected horseshoe crab biologists as all this is going on.
The horseshoe crab is not the only creature along the Georgia shoreline that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Sturgeon are some of our oldest fish. Because of its value for caviar, sturgeon populations across the world have become endangered. Doug Peterson of the University of Georgia has been conducting long-term research on sturgeon at the mouth of the Altamaha River.
Sturgeons are different from other fishes in that they're a very primitive species. The sturgeons have been around as a group for hundreds of millions of years, dating back to the age of dinosaurs. They're unlike our traditional bony fishes like smallmouth bass or largemouth bass because they have a cartilaginous skeleton and large armored plates called scutes on the outside of their body that gives them that sort of prehistoric dinosaur-like appearance.
597.
We have two sturgeon projects currently underway in the Altamaha River system. The first of these is focusing on the Atlantic sturgeon. The species is federally protected now and has been since 1996. Unfortunately, overfishing pushed many populations to the brink of extinction.
Short nose.
We're also looking at short-nosed sturgeon. They're federally protected under the Endangered Species Act and have been since the early 1970s.
553.
Short-nosed populations suffered from exploitation and habitat destruction, primarily the construction of dams. So our study on short-nosed is focusing on the current status of the population, their biology, their life history, and their habitat requirements here in the Altamaha River system.
In order to track the population, Peterson and his team of students from the University of Georgia conduct a number of tests and affix radio transmitters to some of the larger specimens.
What we learn from these data is not only how many fish are in the river, but we also learn what their probable population growth will be.
Not a recapture.
Now it looks like, anyway, that the Altamaha population is recovering after more than a century of commercial exploitation. They've been protected now for 10 years, and we're seeing lots of juveniles and lots of young adults returning to spawn each year. One of the most important things we've learned from our studies of sturgeon here in the Altamaha is that as sturgeon rivers go in the U.S. and really across the world, the Altamaha is one of the premier sturgeon-producing rivers in the world.
Like other ancient fish, sturgeon do not have true bones. Instead, their skeleton is made up of soft cartilage. Another, more infamous family of cartilaginous fishes roams the sea as well. Sharks, rays, and skates have also been ocean residents for millions of years. Sharks in particular are true marvels of evolution, having adapted to perfectly fit their important niche in the marine ecosystem.
They're basically an apex predator, top of the food chain, so they help maintain an ecological balance. When you think about a cascade pyramid, obviously you start at the bottom with bait fishes. There's lots and lots of bait fishes because they're feeding the next tier up. So it goes on up the line. If you remove your top of the chain or remove the sharks, you end up with problems at your middle levels where you wouldn't have a species that was normally dominant. Now all of a sudden it would take off and could be causing a problem within the ecological system.
Though sharks often inspire fear, you are far more likely to be struck by lightning than attacked by a shark. In fact, sharks will generally avoid humans. Still, it's best to avoid swimming or wading in the ocean at dawn or dusk. Human-shark interaction in Georgia is rare. Your best chance of seeing one of these magnificent creatures in our state is on the end of your fishing line.
Sharks are one of those things that are universally appealing to fishermen, especially folks that have grew up fishing freshwater. They always sort of equate saltwater fishing to matching wits with a shark. And species like blacktips and spinners, they get up to 5 or 6 feet as a common size, maybe 50 to 75 pounds, which is a pretty formidable foe on the tackle that we typically use, 30-pound class tackle. We see a lot of other sharks in coastal Georgia that don't grow as large as blacktips and spinners. Scalloped hammerheads, the bonnetheads, Atlantic sharpnose.
There he is.
We have a wide diversity of shark species in coastal Georgia.
Even if sharks aren't what you're out fishing for, you're likely to hook one of these determined fish in Georgia waters.
Today we're out with shark fishing and tarpon fishing out in Ossabaw Sound. Tarpon occur in the same habitats that we find a lot of our larger coastal sharks. So any time that you go out for a day of tarpon fishing, you can pretty much assume that you're going to have an opportunity to catch sharks too. One thing that anglers need to always consider is safety when they're handling sharks and their cousin stingrays. Sharks obviously have sharp teeth and lots of them, so the best way to handle a shark, if you're not going to keep the shark, is to cut the leader as close to the hook as you can and leave the hook in the shark unless it is very easy for you to remove that hook from that shark.
As most anglers will tell you, hooking a stingray is also quite a challenge. These bottom-dwelling cousins of the shark are a common sight along our coast.
Stingrays are another one of those animals that lives in coastal Georgia waters that people kind of have a love-hate relationship with. They're really cool animals to look at, but yet people are justifiably a little fearful of them because of the potential for injury. Pretty much all of our stingrays, with a few rare exceptions, have a barb on their tail, so they've got the potential to inflict a wound to a human being. The conventional practice is to shuffle your feet along the bottom so that you can make contact with the stingray in a non-threatening manner. Instead of stepping directly on the top of it, you sort of bump it. They'll swim off harmlessly. You know, they're not aggressive to human beings. We've got several species. Some of them grow to very large sizes. Cow-nose rays, spotted eagle rays, southern stingrays can be 4 or 5 feet across in the wings.
One of the most impressive ray species in coastal Georgia is the manta ray. These were spotted around Gray's Reef, a national marine sanctuary. More than mere outcrops, reefs are a living part of the ocean ecosystem, teeming with a wide diversity of corals, anemones, and other invertebrates. And reefs provide essential habitat for fish and other vertebrates.
Gray's Reef is an area that's 17 miles off of Sapelo Island, the central portion of the Georgia coast. And it's 60 to 70 feet deep. A beautiful area of live bottom habitat, which is rock outcroppings that are covered with invertebrates and other sea life. And that habitat, in turn, creates a whole food chain. So you have a variety of fish and even marine mammals that you'll find at Gray's Reef. And sea turtles. Just a great area to dive and explore.
Gray's Reef isn't the only structure on Georgia's ocean floor. Over the years, the Department of Natural Resources has created a series of artificial reefs, which also provide shelter for fish.
Why do we need artificial reefs? Well, for Georgia, our outer continental shelf, until you get to the Gulf Stream, is about 80 miles wide. And most of the shelf is just gradual. It's flat, mostly sand and shell. There's very little natural reef area on there. Basically, we need more reef communities near shores for fishermen. The main purpose of Georgia's reef program has been to provide more accessible fishing opportunities, offshore fishing opportunities for fishermen. And that continues to be our primary purpose.
Fishermen in Georgia know the artificial reefs as prime locations for catching game fish like king mackerel and sheep's head. Saltwater fishing is an integral part of coastal living, both culturally and economically. There are a number of important game fish in Georgia. One of the most sought after is the red drum, recently named the state saltwater fish by the Georgia legislature.
The red drum, also known as a redfish or spot-tailed bass to local anglers, is one of our most popular saltwater sport fish species in coastal Georgia.
There he is.
It's a very unique animal in that it's a very long-lived fish. In Georgia, we've documented red drum to live in excess of 40 years. Fishermen like them because they're a hard-fighting fish, but yet they can be caught in a variety of manners.
All right.
So it's got a little bit of something for everybody.
You getting them, Dave? You getting them?
Whether it's shrimping and crabbing, matching wits with a king mackerel, or angling for largemouth bass, a Georgia fishing license allows you to enjoy all of the diverse fishing opportunities Georgia has to offer. Fishing and hunting licenses can be purchased at over 1,000 locations throughout the state, and proceeds help pay for conservation efforts, like management of fish and game populations, hatcheries, maintenance and building of public fishing areas and wildlife management areas, and environmental education. For more information on buying a fishing license, visit this website.
Some of the most heartwarming sights along the waters of Georgia's coast are glimpses of our closest relatives in the ocean, the marine mammals. Though a rare sight, whales and manatees can occasionally be seen navigating Georgia waters. A far more common sight in coastal Georgia is the playful and curious Atlantic bottlenose dolphin. This group is with the Dolphin Project, a volunteer organization tracking the population of bottlenose dolphins in Georgia.
In the mid-1980s, there was a dolphin die-off along the East Coast, and literally dozens of dolphins were washing up dead on the shores. At the time, nobody knew what was happening or why. There were theories, and as it turns out, there really wasn't a lot of information concerning dolphin at this time. So in 1988, a group of people in Atlanta actually pulled together some leading scientists in dolphin research and developed the Dolphin Project as a volunteer organization.
The Dolphin Project does two different kinds of surveys. One is the Abundance Survey. That is for the purpose of counting the relative number of dolphin in a specified zone. The Abundance Survey not only counts the relative number, but also their behavior. We observe if there are any infants or juveniles, and all of it is then transposed into a database for the scientific community to use. The photo survey is specifically to get close-up shots of the dorsal fin, which serves as their fingerprint.
I got involved with the Dolphin Project because I saw an article in our local paper about 13 years ago. Went to the training, found it very interesting, and have been a part of it ever since.
This was my first trip. The fact that it was kind of a nonprofit organization and it was volunteers and all of the information was coming to the Science Center was really interesting to me.
It's their face for me. When you look at them, and sometimes I've had encounters where it's an eye-to-eye encounter, and it's totally awesome.
They're just so friendly, and they always seem to look like they're smiling, even though it's just the shape of their mouth. But I think that, and just that they will approach humans, and they're just such a friendly animal.
When you're in a boat and a dolphin comes up and makes eye contact with you, you know the dolphin is looking at you, and it's just a one-to-one connection that you don't find with most animals.
For me, the selling point is contributing to the knowledge. What numbers were your frames? Whether it be their numbers, whether it be observing whether they're resident pods, resident individuals, or traveling. We work, but it's very enjoyable.
The northern Atlantic right whale, an endangered species, is another Georgia marine mammal that gets a lot of attention. Studies suggest that only 300 to 350 of these cousins to the blue and gray whale remain. Georgia waters provide essential reproductive habitat for these creatures.
Each fall, the right whales that are pregnant migrate all the way down the Atlantic coast, hugging closely along the continental shelf. And they come down here and spend the winter months and give birth to calves. And once the calves are to the point where they can make the migration back, they return in March and April back to the waters off New England and the Canadian Maritimes.
The right whale population was decimated decades ago due to overhunting, but the right whale is now a protected species.
And the right whales are a federally endangered species. The primary issue that the public needs to be aware of is the 500-yard no approach rule, which means if you're on the water boating and you see a right whale and you feel that you're in close proximity to it, you need to back off and keep your distance, or you're actually technically breaking federal rules.
Georgia waters are home to another charismatic species, the loggerhead sea turtle.
The life cycle of loggerheads is really pretty fantastic, and really up until very recently there were several chapters of the story that we just had no idea what happened. The life cycle sort of begins on a Georgia beach at night. These large nesting females that can weigh up to 300 pounds sort of lumber out of the water and dig a hole in the sand and drop approximately 115 eggs. They might do that 4 or 5 times during the 3-month period, and then they leave for the season. And so the eggs develop in the sand for approximately 60 days. The hatchlings emerge at night, and as soon as they emerge, there's just a whole series of threats that they face. The hatchlings move pretty quickly once they come out of the nest. They make their way down the beach. The hatchlings swim until they've sort of run out of energy. We've actually recently done quite a bit of work looking at the status of the population. So on some of our beaches we have data that goes back 30 years. And what the data suggests is approximately a 1.5% decline annually over that time period. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look over 30 years, you've lost a significant portion of your population, and it's like a compound interest rate. It just multiplies on itself. And so there's a lot of concern about the status of loggerhead populations in Georgia.
Loggerheads, like all sea turtles, are reptiles and must breathe air to survive, but they cannot survive out of water for very long. Occasionally, sick loggerheads like this one are found stranded on the beach. If rescued, stranded turtles must undergo a process of rehabilitation before returning to the wild.
23.0 centimeters.
Okay.
Normally, sick or injured Georgia turtles are sent to South Carolina or Florida for rehabilitation, but construction is underway to build a sea turtle center on Jekyll Island. Dr. Terry Norton has been involved in getting the center established.
We probably get about 10 to 15 turtles a year. We expect that the Georgia Sea Turtle Center will probably see turtles from northeastern Florida as well as potentially other surrounding states as needed.
Once the center is established, turtles like this one will have a place to go in Georgia. As we've seen, the sea turtle is but one of Georgia's majestic sea creatures, and understanding the value of species like this helps us to better understand the complexities of marine life.
The diversity of life in the oceans has always been something that has been very intriguing to man. When you look at wildlife on the land and in the air and in fresh water, it's certainly very diverse, but when you move into the ocean, it comes in all shapes and sizes and descriptions. Over time, we've become much more knowledgeable and much more sensitive to the fact that our life on dry land is linked to life in the ocean. If we're good stewards of what's in the ocean, then the benefits are going to come back to us, and our life on land is probably going to be very enriched by that.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.